The wind on Vera 9 did not just blow, it scoured. It carried a fine silicate grit that chewed through filters, scratched reinforced glass, and found its way into the deepest creases of every enviro suit on the planet. Dr. Elias Cade stood on the ridge overlooking Sector 4, spitting a mixture of sand and lukewarm coffee onto the ground. Below him, the excavation site looked less like a scientific endeavor and more like a fresh wound in the planet's crust, swarming with automated drones and sweaty human laborers. Elias adjusted his goggles, the servo motors in the lenses whirring as they focused on the primary trench. He was 40 years old, though the frontier sun had etched lines around his eyes that added another decade to his face. He wore his reputation like his battered leather flight jacket. He was brilliant. He was difficult. And he was currently the only thing standing between this archaeological site and total bureaucratic collapse. To his left, the heavy Durasteel perimeter fence hummed with lethal voltage. Beyond it, the jungle waited, a tangle of violet flora that screamed biological danger. To his right, the prefabricated barracks of the corporate security detail, Vanguard Solutions, sat like ugly gray bricks baking in the sun. A voice crackled in his earpiece. "Dr. Cade, we have a situation at the lower stratum." His lead foreman, Jace, said. The tone was tight, anxious. Elias tapped his comms unit. "Define situation, Jace. Did we hit another gas pocket, or did the Diaspora Council send another drone to hover over us and judge our digging technique?" "Neither," Jace replied. "We hit a door." Elias froze. He tossed the rest of his coffee into the dirt and began sliding down the scree slope toward the lift platform. "A door? You mean a wall?" "I mean a door." "Elias, a sealed entry. The resonance scans are going haywire. You need to get down here before the Vanguard goons realize what we have found." Elias moved fast. He dodged a hovering hauler drone carrying a crate of fossils and jumped onto the cargo lift. He punched the button for level 6. As the lift groaned and descended into the cool shadow of the trench, Elias felt that familiar hum in his blood. It was the thrill of the unknown, the drug that had dragged him across 3 sectors and a dozen hostile worlds. The excavation on Vera 9 was a powder keg. The Terran Excavation Consortium was footing the bill, desperate for precursor technology to patent. Vanguard Solutions was the private military contractor hired to protect the investment, though they seemed more interested in finding weapons than pottery. And watching it all were the local alien factions, the Diaspora Council, who claimed this planet was the cradle of their lost civilization and viewed every shovel of dirt as a potential war crime. The lift hit the bottom with a heavy clang. The air here was cooler, smelling of damp earth and ozone. Jace was waiting by the entrance to a newly cleared tunnel, holding a datapad that was flashing angry red warnings. "Look at the frequency," Jace said. Shoving the pad at Elias, Elias scanned the data. "Harmonics are off the charts," Elias murmured. "This is not natural geology." He walked past Jace, stepping over cables and discarded ration packs, moving deeper into the tunnel. The portable floodlights cast long, shivering shadows against the walls. The rock here changed texture. It shifted from the rough sedimentary layers of the upper crust to something smooth, black, and seamless. It was a material that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. At the end of the tunnel, the team had cleared the debris from a massive circular slab. It was 10 feet tall, etched with intricate, flowing script that seemed to shift when viewed from the corner of the eye. Elias reached out, his gloved hand hovering inches from the surface. He could feel a vibration in the air, a low thrum that rattled his teeth. "No handles," Elias said. "No keypad, no seams." "Vanguard is sending a squad down," Jace warned. Looking back up the tunnel, Captain Voss heard the seismic alert. He wants to rig it with blasting charges. Elias spun around. Blasting charges? Is he insane? If this is a resonance lock, a concussive blast could destabilize the entire cavern. We would be buried under 2 million tons of rock. You tell him that, Jace said. He is 3 minutes out. Elias looked back at the door. He needed to open it. Now. He reached into his belt and pulled out a device that looked like a modified pistol grip with a satellite dish welded to the front. It was his own invention, the Sonic Mapper, a tool designed to ping structural integrity with sound waves. It was experimental, temperamental, and strictly unauthorized for use on delicate heritage sites. Perfect. Elias cranked the dial on the side of the device. Everyone back, Elias ordered. The 3 other diggers in the tunnel scrambled behind a heavy drilling rig. Elias stood his ground, aiming the dish at the center of the black door. Let us see what you are listening for, Elias whispered. He pulled the trigger. The device emitted a high-pitched shriek, a sound on the very edge of human hearing. The display on the back of the device scrambled, drawing a chaotic waveform. The door reacted instantly. The black stone rippled like water disturbed by a stone. The vibration in the floor spiked, knocking a loose canister of sealant off a crate. The script on the door flared with a dull, amber light. It is sound sensitive, Elias said, grinning. It is a harmonic lock. Suddenly, the ground lurched violently to the right. A deep, grinding roar echoed through the planet's crust. Vera Nunine was geologically unstable on a good day. But the sonic pulse had just tickled a fault line. The floodlights overhead sparked and died, plunging the tunnel into absolute darkness. Emergency lights, Jace shouted. Red strobe lights kicked on, bathing the tunnel in a blood-colored haze. Dust rained down from the ceiling in choking clouds. Dr. Cade, we need to evacuate, Jace yelled over the rumble. Not yet, Elias shouted back. I have almost got the frequency. He adjusted the dial, ignoring the tremor that was making it hard to stand. The door was groaning now, a sound like bending metal. Elias watched the waveform on his device. He needed to match the inverse frequency of the lock. He needed to sing the door open. Come on, Elias muttered. Open up. He twisted the knob a fraction of a millimeter. The device shrieked again, this time in a lower, throbbing register. The black stone slab split down the middle. There was no mechanical sound of gears or hydraulics. The stone simply retreated, dissolving into the walls as if it had never been there. A gust of stale, pressurized air blasted out of the chamber, smelling of ozone and crushed flowers. The earthquake subsided as quickly as it had begun, leaving only the distant rumble of settling rock. Elias lowered the device, his heart hammering against his ribs. He clicked on his shoulder-mounted flashlight and stepped through the opening. Doctor, wait, Jace called out, but he did not follow. Elias ignored him. He walked into the chamber. It was a perfect sphere, the walls lined with hexagonal tiles that pulsed with a faint, dying light. In the center of the room, raised on a dais of white crystal, was the source of the signal. Elias stopped. His breath caught in his throat. It was a woman. Or at least, it had been. She was a statue, carved from a material that looked like gray marble, but with a translucence that suggested depth. She was kneeling, her head bowed, her hands resting on her thighs in a pose of absolute terrifying serenity. She wore armor that seemed grown rather than forged. Plates of chitinous material flowing over her shoulders and chest. A halo of crystallized technology floated behind her head, motionless and dark. She was breathtaking. The artistry was unlike anything Elias had ever seen in 20 years of digging up dead civilizations. The sculptor had captured every eyelash, every strand of hair, the slight part of her lips. Elias stepped closer, his boots clicking loudly on the crystal floor. He scanned the dais. There were glyphs glowing softly at her feet. Stasis glyphs. She is not a carving, Elias whispered to himself. He checked his scanner. The readings were impossible. There was zero biological activity, yet the mass spectrometer insisted the material before him was organic mineral. It was a biomineral cocoon, a shell designed to weather the collapse of stars. She was waiting out an apocalypse that happened 5,000 years ago. Voices echoed from the tunnel behind him. Heavy boots, the distinct click of safety latches being disengaged. Captain Voss and his vanguard squad had arrived. Step away from the artifact. Cade! Voss bellowed, his voice distorted by his helmet speakers. Elias did not turn around. He was staring at the statue's face. He felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to protect this discovery from the brute force of a corporate salvage team. He needed to buy time. He needed to understand what he was looking at. The sonic mapper in his hand was still active, humming quietly. Elias looked at the readout. The chamber was reacting to the device, but also to the ambient noise. He looked at the woman. She looked lonely, isolated by eons of silence. You are a long way from home, aren't you? Elias said softly. His voice was not loud, but the acoustics of the sphere amplified it, carrying the rich baritone notes of his voice around the room, layering them over one another. The sonic mapper in his hand pulsed in sync with his speech. Suddenly, the halo behind the woman's head flared with blinding white light. A low chime rang out, pure and resonant. The stasis glyphs at her feet turned from amber to a brilliant, piercing blue. What did you do? Voss shouted, entering the chamber with his rifle raised. I did nothing, Elias said, raising his hands, though he kept the device gripped tight. I just spoke to her. The chamber began to vibrate. The gray stone skin of the statue cracked. It was a sound like ice breaking on a frozen lake. A spiderweb of thin fractures raced across her cheek, down her neck, and along her arms. Beneath the gray stone, something glowed. Back! Everyone back! Voss ordered. It is a biological weapon, containment protocols. No! Elias yelled, stepping between the squad and the dais. It is a depetrification sequence. You cannot stop it now. If you fire on her, you will shatter her while she is vulnerable. The fractures widened. Pieces of the gray shell began to flake off, dissolving into dust before they hit the floor. Underneath the shell, skin was revealed. It was pale, luminous, and undeniably real. Voss leveled his rifle at Elias's chest. Move! Cade! That is a direct order. We are seizing this asset for public safety. Elias's mind raced. He needed a lie. A big one. You cannot seize her, Elias shouted, pointing a finger at the confused captain. This chamber is registered as a Class 4 ancestral tomb under the Interstellar Heritage Act. I just logged the beacon. If you discharge a weapon in here, the legal fines alone will bankrupt Vanguard Solutions before you can reload. Do you want to explain to the board why you vaporized a quarterly profit margin? Voss hesitated. The mention of profit margins was the only language corporate mercenaries understood fluently. In that second of hesitation, the process accelerated. The woman's hair, which had been rigid stone, suddenly fell loose, cascading over her shoulders in a wave of dark silk. Her chest heaved, a microscopic movement, but visible. She is waking up, Jace whispered from the doorway. Elias turned back to her. The stone was receding rapidly, retreating like a tide. He saw the flush of violet blood returning to her cheeks. He saw the tension in her muscles. We need to move her, Elias said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Voss, if she wakes up here in a combat zone, she will go into shock. We need a sterile environment. My mobile lab is parked at the top of the lift. Voss lowered his rifle an inch. You have 10 minutes, Cade. Then she belongs to Vanguard. Elias did not wait for clarification. Jace, get the grav stretcher. Now! The next hour was a blur of controlled chaos. Elias bullied the security team into helping them load the woman, who was now 70% flesh and 30% crumbling stone, onto a grav sled. They covered her with a thermal blanket to hide the glowing bioluminescence that was beginning to pulse beneath her skin. They rushed her up the lift, past the gawking laborers, and into the clean, white interior of Elias's mobile quarantine lab. Elias sealed the airlock, shutting out the dust and the shouting Captain Voss. Silence descended. The lab was small, crammed with equipment. Elias locked the door and dimmed the lights. He moved the sled to the center of the room. He could hear the hum of the external generators and the angry thudding of fists on the outer hull, but he tuned them out. He pulled the blanket back. The last of the stone shell on her face had flaked away. She was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Her features were sharp, regal, but softened by the vulnerability of sleep. Her skin was cool to the touch, humming with a faint electrical charge. Elias checked the biomonitors. Her heart rate was non-existent. Her neural activity was erratic. Come on, Elias whispered, leaning over her. Do not give up now. He checked the hydration levels. He adjusted the ambient temperature. He worked with the frantic precision of a man trying to defuse a bomb that was also a masterpiece painting. Then, it happened. The sound was like a vacuum seal breaking, a sharp, desperate inhale. The woman's back arched off the table, her eyes snapped open. They were not human eyes. They were solid, swirling pools of gold and nebula violet, with no sclera, no pupil. They glowed with an internal light that illuminated Elias's face. She gasped, the air rushing into lungs that had been stone for millennia. Her hands clawed at the air, panic seizing her limbs. Easy, Elias said, grabbing her wrists gently. You are safe. Look at me. You are safe. She froze, her gaze locked onto his face. The alien eyes dilated, the swirling colors slowing down. She stared at him with an intensity that made Elias feel like he was being scanned down to his genetic code. She was disoriented, trembling violently. Her mouth opened, trying to form shapes that her tongue had forgotten. Elias held her gaze, keeping his voice steady, low, and rhythmic. Just breathe. You are in a safe place. I am Elias. You are safe. She blinked. The bioluminescence in her skin flared and dimmed in time with her breathing. She seemed to be searching for something, an anchor. Then, she spoke. Her voice was raspy, unused, but it carried a harmonic resonance that vibrated in Elias's chest bone. It was the sound of a cello played in a canyon. You. She rasped. Yes, Elias said, leaning closer. You said, waiting. Elias frowned, confused for a microsecond. Then he remembered what he had said in the chamber, when he thought she was just a statue. You are a long way from home. No, that was not it. He had thought it. What had he said? He had said, you are a long way from home. Wait. No. The memory clicked. In the chaos, he had whispered something else when he first touched the cold stone, a habitual murmur he used for all his best finds. I have got you. The woman's grip on his wrist tightened, crushing in its strength. You said. I have got you, she whispered, the words tumbling out with difficulty. Elias stared at her. She had heard him. Through the stone, through the stasis. Yes, Elias said, his voice soft. I said that. She exhaled, a long, shuddering breath. Voice, she said, tapping her own chest, then pointing a trembling finger at his throat. First memory. Your voice. As she spoke, the biomonitors behind Elias went from erratic red lines to a steady, rhythmic green pulse. Her heart rate synchronized, her neural activity smoothed out into a coherent pattern. Elias glanced at the screen, then back at her. The data was clear. Her vitals were stabilizing only when he spoke. It was not just a wake-up call. It was a neural handshake. Her physiology was latching onto his vocal frequency as a lifeline. "Who are you?" Elias asked. She opened her mouth to answer, but the ship suddenly shuddered. A heavy metallic boom reverberated through the hull. The interior comms unit blared to life. "Dr. Cade, this is Jace. You have to see this broadcast. They are locking us down." Elias let go of her wrists and rushed to the console. He slapped the receive button. A holographic newsfeed projected into the air above the sterile table. The face of a severe-looking woman in a high council uniform filled the screen, effective immediately. "The Vera 9 excavation site is under Class 1 emergency protection. All travel is restricted. We have received disturbing reports of a biological breach." The image shifted. It was grainy footage, taken from a helmet camera. It showed the interior of the chamber, and it showed Elias standing in front of the statue. It showed the moment the stone cracked and the woman's flesh was revealed. It was leaked footage. Someone in Voss's squad had uploaded it. The news anchor's voice continued. "Shadow factions have already claimed responsibility for the awakening of what they call the Pale Queen. Riots have broken out in the capital sectors. The Diaspora Council is demanding immediate custody of the entity." Elias looked at the screen, watching the chaos unfold in real time. Then he looked back at the woman on the table. She was sitting up now, the thermal blanket slipping off her shoulders. She was watching the hologram with a look of terrifying recognition. "They are coming," she said. Elias looked at the airlock door. He could hear the heavy magnetic boots of a breaching team clamping onto the outer hull. He looked at his experimental sonic tool, then at the confused, powerful being sitting on his exam table. "Yes," Elias said, grabbing a medkit and tossing it to her. "They are coming." He hit the release on the lab's mobile docking clamps. The entire module lurched as it detached from the base station. "So we had better get moving." The woman looked at him, her golden eyes flashing. "Moving," she repeated, testing the word. The lab's engines fired, and they blasted away from the ridge, shooting into the violet twilight of Vera 9, just as the first laser blasts scorched the ground where they had been standing. The chase was on. The mobile lab had been grounded. That was the polite, bureaucratic term for it. In reality, it had been forced out of the sky by two corporate interceptors and herded into a high-security containment hangar on the edge of the human settlement. Now, the lab sat in the center of the hangar floor like a specimen in a jar, surrounded by armed guards, nervous technicians, and a perimeter fence that hummed with enough voltage to kill a rhinoceros. Inside the lab, the air was recycled and smelled faintly of antiseptic and old coffee. Dr. Elias Cade sat on a stool, rubbing his temples. He had been awake for 30 hours. Across from him, the woman sat on the edge of the bio-bed. She was wearing a pair of Elias's spare mechanic coveralls, which she had rolled up at the sleeves and ankles. The utilitarian gray fabric should have looked ridiculous on her, but instead, it looked like high fashion. She had been staring at her hands for 20 minutes, flexing the fingers, watching the tendons move beneath the pale, luminous skin. She looked up, her golden eyes locking onto his. "Sarai," she said. Elias lowered his hands. "Sarai, is that your name?" She tilted her head, a bird-like movement that was both sharp and graceful. "It is a sound that fits," she said. Her voice was gaining strength, losing the raspy quality of the stone and taking on a melodic, multi-tonal depth. But it feels borrowed, like a label placed on a sealed box to tell the inventory drones what is inside. It is not who I am. It is just what I am called. Elias nodded slowly. Well, Sarai, it is a start. My name is Elias, not Dr. Cade, just Elias. Elias, she repeated. She tasted the vowels. It sounds like soft earth. She slid off the bed. Her bare feet touched the metal floor and she winced, not from pain but from intensity. She walked toward the wall of the lab, her movements fluid and terrifyingly precise. She did not walk like a human, with a heavy heel strike. She flowed, her center of gravity shifting perfectly with every step. She placed her hand flat against the bulkhead of the lab. She closed her eyes. This metal is confused, she murmured. Confused? Elias asked, standing up. It was mined from an asteroid belt in the Kuval system, she said, her voice distant. Smelted in a factory where the workers were afraid. It remembers the heat. It remembers the fear. It vibrates with it. Elias stared at her. You can read the history of the metal? I can hear its resonance, she corrected, opening her eyes. Everything sings. Elias, even the dead things, especially the dead things. The stone you woke me from, it was screaming. She turned to face him, a playful glint entering her eyes. And you, Elias, you vibrate too. You are very loud for a soft thing. Elias blinked, feeling a flush creep up his neck. I am loud? Your blood, she said, taking a step closer. It rushes like a pump that is working too hard. And your skin conducts electricity when you look at me. It is inefficient. Are all humans so poorly insulated? Elias laughed, a short, nervous sound. We call that anxiety, Sarai. And yes, most of us are poorly insulated against situations like this. She smiled. It was the first time she had smiled, and it transformed her face from an imperious statue into something devastatingly alive. I like it, she said. It is honest. The ones outside, the ones with the weapons, they are quiet. They are hiding their noise. That makes them dangerous. The intercom on the wall buzzed, shattering the moment. Dr. Cade. The voice of the hangar commander barked. The delegation has arrived. You are required in the briefing room. Immediately. Elias sighed, the weight of the universe settling back onto his shoulders. Stay here, Elias told her. Do not open the door for anyone but me. Sarai sat back on the bed, crossing her legs. I will wait. Elias of the soft earth. Try not to vibrate yourself to pieces. Elias walked out of the airlock and into the lion's den. The briefing room was a glass-walled box overlooking the hangar. It was packed with people who hated each other. On one side sat the Terran Excavation Consortium representatives, suits sharp enough to cut glass, led by Director Vane. Vane was a man who looked like he had been calculated rather than born. He viewed the universe as a spreadsheet, and Sarai was an unfiled expense. On the other side sat the Diaspora Council. They were a mix of species, descendants of the civilization that had once ruled this sector. They wore ceremonial robes over environment suits. Their leader, a tall, slender being named Orith, looked at Elias with eyes full of religious fury. And in the middle, looking bored, was the corporate security liaison from Vanguard Solutions, polishing a heavy pistol with a microfiber cloth. Dr. Cade. Director Vane began without preamble. We have a problem of ownership. She is not property, Elias snapped, taking the empty seat at the end of the table. She is a sentient being, a survivor. She is a biological artifact recovered with consortium funding, using consortium equipment. On a consortium-leased planet, Vane countered smoothly. Legally, she is a proprietary discovery. We have the rights to study her genome, her technology, and her origins. This is blasphemy, Orith shouted, slamming a fist onto the table. She is a last witness. She is a sacred vessel of the progenitors. She belongs to the diaspora. She must be taken to the Temple of Clouds and awakened properly, not poked and prodded by human merchants. She is already awake, Elias said, his voice cutting through the noise. And she has a name, Sarai. Both sides went silent. She speaks? Vane asked, his eyes narrowing. She speaks. Elias confirmed. She thinks. She feels. And she is currently the only person in this facility who isn't trying to sell her or worship her. We demand custody, Orith insisted, though his voice was lower now. She is the key to our history. She can tell us why the Empire fell. She can lead us to the vaults. And we deny that demand, Vane said. The technology in her stasis chamber alone is worth more than this entire planet. If we release her to you, you will disappear into the nebulas and we will never see a return on our investment. The argument exploded again. Elias sat back, watching them. They were vultures fighting over a carcass that was still breathing. He felt a vibration in his pocket. It was his datapad. He pulled it out under the table. It was a message from the lab's AI assistant. Dr. Cade. You should see this. Elias tapped the screen. A diagnostic from the local orbital grid appeared. Since Sarai had awakened, 3 dormant satellites in high orbit, junk that had been floating dead for 1,000 years, had reactivated. They were not broadcasting to the planet. They were broadcasting out, into deep space, a narrow band signal, encrypted and powerful. Elias felt a chill. Gentlemen, Elias said, standing up. They ignored him. Everyone, shut up, Elias roared. The room froze. We have a bigger problem than custody, Elias said. Since she woke up, something in orbit woke up too. She is broadcasting. Vane looked at his own datapad, verifying the claim. A distress beacon? Vane asked. No, Elias said. It is not a distress beacon. It is a location marker. He looked at Orith. You said she was a last witness. What exactly did she witness? Orith looked uneasy. The end, he whispered. She witnessed the silence that comes before the fall. Elias turned and ran out of the room. He needed to get back to the lab. The stasis chamber had not been a monument. It had been a bunker. She hadn't been preserved for the future. She had been hidden from the past. When he burst back into the mobile lab, Sarai was standing in the center of the room, her eyes closed, her arms raised as if conducting an orchestra. The air in the room was humming. Objects, small tools, data pads, a coffee mug, were floating 3 inches off the surfaces. Sarai, Elias called out. She opened her eyes. The floating objects clattered to the floor. They are listening, she said. Her voice was tight with fear. Who? The ones who broke the world, she said. I can feel the sky watching me. Elias moved to the console. The AI, which he had named Sola, manifested as a swirling blue avatar on the screen. Doctor, Sola said, her synthesized voice dripping with sarcasm. I was about to inform you that our guest has been manipulating the local gravity fields. It is wreaking havoc on my sensors. Also, the romantic tension in this room has increased by 40% since you re-entered. It is statistically significant. Not now. Sola, Elias muttered. Sarai, we need to know what those satellites are saying. They are saying, I am here, Sarai said. She walked over to him, invading his personal space again. She smelled of ozone and ancient dust. Why did you wake me? Elias? I didn't know, Elias said, holding his ground. I thought I was finding a statue. She looked at him, searching his face for the lie. She didn't find one. You are a chaotic creature, she decided. You stumble into the dark and light a flare without knowing if you are in a cave or a powder magazine. That is a fair assessment, Elias admitted. She leaned in closer. Her face was inches from his. He could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Tell me about this. Bonding, she said softly. What? Elias blinked, the sudden shift in topic throwing him off balance. In the archives I can sense through the floor. The human data, it says you bond in pairs. But it is messy, unregulated. Yes, Elias said, his throat suddenly dry. It is. My people. She hesitated. We were paired by resonance. The state calculated our frequencies. If you matched, you were mated. It was perfect. It was efficient. There was no pain. That sounds peaceful, Elias said. It was dead, she whispered. She reached out and touched his chest, right over his heart. Her fingers were hot. I watched the world burn because we were too polite to scream. Tell me, Elias, when you choose a mate, how do you know? If there is no calculation, you just know, Elias said, his voice rough. It is not about efficiency. It is about resonance, I guess, but a different kind. You choose them because the world is quieter when they are there. She looked at his lips. And do you choose me? She asked. Or am I just an artifact you dug up? Elias felt his heart hammering against her fingertips. He wanted to kiss her. It was a physical ache, a magnetic pull that defied all professional ethics and survival instincts. Sarai, he said, his voice trembling. I cannot answer that. You have been awake for 6 hours and you are in a cage. If I touch you, if I choose you, that is not a choice for you. That is just gravity. You have to be free before you can choose anything. She stared at him for a long heartbeat. Then, slowly, she pulled her hand away. A small smile played on her lips. You are very noble, Elias. It is frustrating. Warning. Sola interrupted. Proximity alert. Multiple heat signatures approaching the outer hull. They are not using standard access codes. Elias spun around. Vanguard. Negative. Sola said. Equipment signatures do not match corporate security. They are using stealth suits. And, Doctor, they are planting explosives on the airlock. Get down! Elias yelled. He tackled Sarai, driving her to the floor behind the heavy plasteel workbench. The airlock blew. It was not a breaching charge. It was a demolition charge. The blast tore the door off its hinges and sent a fireball rolling across the ceiling of the lab. The concussion wave shattered every monitor in the room. Gunfire erupted immediately. Suppressed, rhythmic shots. Thwip, thwip, thwip. Elias scrambled for his sidearm, a heavy kinetic pistol he kept in the emergency kit. He fired blindly over the workbench. Who is it? Sarai shouted, pressing herself against the metal floor. Not the council. Elias grunted, checking the charge. They wouldn't risk damaging you. 3 figures moved through the smoke. They were sleek, professional, moving with military precision. They weren't here to capture. They were here to sanitize. Elias fired again, hitting one in the shoulder. The figure barely flinched, returning fire with a plasma rifle that melted a hole in the workbench inches from Elias's head. We cannot stay here, Sarai said. We are trapped. The only exit is the airlock. No, Sarai said. She placed her hands flat on the floor. Her eyes glowed with a terrifying intensity. There is water. Beneath us. Deep. Elias looked at her. The aquifers, that is 20 meters of reinforced concrete down. She closed her eyes. The air in the room began to scream. The resonance hum returned, louder this time, painful. "Cover your ears!" she screamed. Elias dropped the gun and clamped his hands over his ears. Sarai screamed. It was a vocalization that matched the resonant frequency of the floor panels perfectly. The floor disintegrated. It didn't break. It shattered into dust, a 3-meter circle simply giving way. The heavy concrete beneath cracked and crumbled. They fell. Elias hit the water hard. It was freezing, black, and rushing fast. He tumbled in the dark, his shoulder slamming against a rock. He gasped, swallowing a mouthful of foul water, and flailed for the surface. A hand grabbed his collar. "I have got you," Sarai's voice said in the dark. She dragged him to a ledge. They were in a storm drain, an ancient subterranean river that ran beneath the human settlement. It was pitch black, but Sarai was glowing softly, casting a pale violet light on the wet walls. Elias coughed, spitting out water. He wheezed. "That was reckless. It was effective," she countered, wringing out her hair. They sat there for a moment, catching their breath. Above them, through the hole in the ceiling, they could see flashlight beams sweeping the lab. "They are not following," Sarai whispered. "They think we are buried." Elias checked his gear. His gun was gone. His datapad was smashed. But he still had his belt pouch. He pulled out a small, crushed device. It was a comms link he had swiped from the belt of the mercenary he had shot during the firefight. He must have grabbed it in the scramble without thinking. It was blinking. Elias adjusted the frequency, trying to catch the signal. "Target neutralized," a distorted voice said. "The asset is buried. Confirmed kill." "Who is this?" another voice asked. "This is Vanguard Command. We have reports of an explosion. Disregard," the first voice said. "This is Unity Directorate. The site is sanitized. We are scrubbing the footage. Blame it on the alien extremists." Elias froze. He looked at Sarai. "Unity Directorate?" Sarai asked. Elias stared at the device. "I have heard rumors," he whispered. "A shadow broker. They sell weapons to the corporations and intelligence to the aliens. They keep the war going because peace is bad for business." He looked up at Sarai, the realization dawning on him. "They didn't want to steal you, Sarai. They wanted to kill you. Why?" "Because you are a symbol," Elias said. "If the diaspora gets you, they unite. If the corporation gets you, they win. But if you die, everyone fights everyone else forever. And the Directorate gets rich selling the bullets." Sarai stood up, the violet light of her skin reflected in the rushing black water. She looked terrifying. She looked like a queen who had just been handed a sword. "They think I am dead," she said softly. "Yes." "Good," she said. "Then they will not see me coming." She reached down and pulled Elias to his feet. "Show me the way out. Elias, we have a war to stop." Elias looked at her. The scared confusion was gone. In its place was a cold, hard resolve. He realized then that he hadn't just revived a woman. He had revived a revolution. "We follow the water," Elias said. "It dumps out into the old transit tunnels." He took her hand. It was still warm. "And Sarai? Yes? Next time you scream a hole in the floor, warn me 2 seconds earlier." She squeezed his hand. "1 second. That is all I can promise." They turned and ran into the dark, the sound of their footsteps swallowed by the roar of the underground river. The atmosphere of the floating market city of Orim was thick enough to chew. Suspended in the magnetic turbulence of a gas giant's upper atmosphere, the city was a sprawling vertical favela of rusted docking clamps, neon-drenched bazaars, and anti-gravity barges chained together by centuries of commerce and crime. It smelled of frying synthetic meat, ozone, and desperation. Dr. Elias Cade pulled the hood of his scavenged cloak lower over his face. Beside him, Sarai moved with a grace that drew too many eyes. She was covered in a heavy, grease-stained mechanic's poncho they had stolen from a maintenance locker, but she wore it like imperial robes. "Keep your head down," Elias murmured, guiding her through a throng of traders shouting in 5 different dialects. Sarai did not keep her head down. She was too busy staring. She looked at a stall displaying jagged shards of violet glass labeled as soul stones of the ancients. "They are selling debris from a sanitation facility," Sarai said, her voice a mix of wonder and horror. "That is not a soul stone. It is part of a waste recycler." "Keep walking," Elias hissed, steering her away from the vendor who was already eyeing them suspiciously. "They rewrite us," Sarai whispered, her golden eyes scanning the chaotic verticality of the city. "They take our trash and make it into their religion. They take our history and sell it by the kilogram. Is this what my people are to you, Elias? Just inventory? To most people here, yes," Elias said grimly. "To me? No." They reached the lower docking ring, a shadowed sector where the fog from the gas giant swirled around the landing pads. A battered, asymmetrical freighter sat on pad 9. It looked like a collection of spare parts flying in close formation. The hull was painted a defiant, peeling red. Standing on the loading ramp was a woman with short-cropped silver hair and a jacket that had seen more war zones than a heavy infantryman. She was chewing on a toothpick and watching them approach with amused detachment. "Captain Yara Wren, you look terrible." "Cade," Yara called out, her voice cutting through the roar of a passing engine. "I thought the university finally revoked your tenure and threw you in a deep hole. It is good to see you too." "Yara," Elias said, stopping at the base of the ramp. "I need a ride." Yara spat the toothpick onto the deck. "I am not a taxi service, Elias, and you still owe me 4,000 credits from the Joba Prime fiasco." "I will pay you double," Elias said. "But first, we need to get off-world, and we need to make a stop at the blind auction." Yara's eyes flicked to Sarai. She looked the alien woman up and down, noting the strange, luminous quality of her skin beneath the grime. "Who is the runway model?" Yara asked. "She looks expensive." "She is a passenger," Elias said. "Her name is Sarai." Sarai stepped forward. She looked at Yara, then at the ship. "Your vessel has a rhythm," Sarai said. "The fuel injectors are misaligned on the starboard engine. It sings in a minor key. It sounds lonely." Yara blinked. She looked at Elias. "Did she just insult my ship?" "She diagnosed it," Elias said. "Can we get on board? There are people looking for us who make the Joba Prime cartel look like a debating society." Yara sighed and hit the ramp release. "Get in. But if she touches my navigation console, I am venting the airlock." 2 hours later, they were navigating the claustrophobic canals of the mid-levels in a borrowed hover skiff. The blind auction was held in a hollowed-out reactor core deep within the city's underbelly, a place where the wealthy and the amoral gathered to buy things that were illegal in 12 systems. Yara piloted the skiff with one hand, navigating the traffic of floating barges. "So, let me get this straight," Yara said, shouting over the wind. "We are breaking into a black market auction to buy a piece of rock, so we can find a map, so we can save the galaxy from a conspiracy?" "Cade, your midlife crisis is exhausting. It is not just a rock," Sarai said, sitting in the back. "It is a resonance etching. It belongs to my stasis chamber. It was stripped from the door while I slept, and it has the coordinates for the vault," Elias added. They docked at a shadowy platform. The entrance to the auction was guarded by 2 massive droids. Elias flashed a stolen invite code on his datapad. The droid stepped aside. Inside, the reactor core was lit by floating candelabras. The elite of the sector mingled in masks and velvet, sipping blue wine. In the center of the room, on a rotating podium, artifacts were being displayed. Elias, Yara, and Sarai stood in the shadows of the mezzanine. Sarai was tense. She watched the crowd with the eyes of a predator cornered in a cage. "They are hollow," Sarai whispered. "I can feel their greed. It vibrates in the floor and it makes my teeth ache." "Focus on the artifact," Elias said softly. The auctioneer, a man with a cybernetic jaw, stepped onto the podium. "Lot number 47, the auctioneer announced. "A primitive navigational etching. Origin unknown. Recovered from the Vera sector. Bidding starts at 50,000 credits." "That is it," Sarai said. It was a slab of the same black stone as her chamber, etched with star charts that shifted when the light hit them. "I do not have 50,000 credits," Elias muttered. "I have a flashbang grenade and a bad attitude," Yara whispered, patting her jacket. "Wait," Elias said. "Look at the buyers." A group of men in gray suits had moved to the front. They weren't bidding. They were positioning themselves. They were Unity Directorate. Elias recognized the tactical earpieces. They are not going to buy it, Elias realized. They are going to seize it. The moment he said it, the lights went out. The room exploded into chaos. Blaster fire erupted from the floor. The Directorate team vaulted onto the stage. "Move!" Elias shouted. They sprinted along the mezzanine. Yara pulled a heavy pistol and fired 2 shots at a chandelier, dropping it onto the walkway to block the security droids. Sarai didn't run. She leaped. She cleared the railing, dropping 30 feet to the stage below. She landed in a crouch, the floor cracking beneath her impact. The Directorate agents froze. Sarai stood up. She raised her hand toward the black stone tablet. "Come to me," she commanded. Her voice wasn't just sound. It was force. A resonance wave hit the tablet. The stone vibrated, tearing itself free from the magnetic clamps. It flew across the stage into her hand. She spun around as an agent lunged for her. She didn't hit him. She simply screamed, a short, sharp burst of sound directed at his chest. The sonic impact threw him backward 10 feet, crashing into the podium. "Sarai!" Elias yelled from the balcony. "Catch!" He threw a grappling line down. She caught it one-handed, clutching the tablet to her chest with the other. Yara hit the winch on her belt, and Sarai was hauled up just as the stage was raked with laser fire. They burst out of the rear exit, tumbling onto the roof of a neighboring warehouse. The chase was on. Hoverbikes screamed out of the alleyways, their pilots wearing the gray helmets of the Directorate. "To the skiff!" Yara yelled, firing blindly over her shoulder. They sprinted across the rooftops. The anti-gravity generators of the city made the physics strange. Jumps were floaty. Landings were hard. A bike swooped low, a gunner leaning out with a stun baton. Elias ducked, the baton missing his head by inches. He grabbed the skids of the bike, his weight dragging the nose down. The bike crashed into a ventilation stack, exploding in a shower of sparks. They reached the skiff. Yara gunned the engine before they were even fully seated. The small craft shot forward, weaving through the suspended laundry and power lines of the residential district. Sarai was shaking. She sat in the bottom of the skiff, clutching the stone tablet. Her eyes were wide, unseeing. "Sarai?" Elias called out, crawling back to her as Yara banked hard to avoid a cargo drone. "Voices?" Sarai whispered. Too many voices. She was hyperventilating. The combat, the resonance use, the stress, it was triggering a cascade in her neural pathways. Elias grabbed her shoulders. "Sarai, look at me." She looked up. Her pupils were dilating rapidly, cycling through colors. "I hear them." She gasped. "The council." My father. They are arguing. It is a memory, Elias said. It is just a memory. Listen to my voice. Focus on my voice. His voice. The sound of it cut through the noise in her head like a lighthouse beam through fog. It was the anchor, the key. Flashback. She was standing in a great hall of white crystal. The air hummed with the sound of 1,000 voices singing in harmony. But the harmony was breaking. A tall man in robes of state was shouting, "We must use the resonance. Sarai, the enemy is at the gate. We can vibrate their ships into dust." "No! Father!" Sarai shouted back. Her voice was strong, commanding. "If we turn the song into a weapon, we lose the music. We become just another noise in the dark. I will not let you turn our heritage into a gun. Then you are a traitor to your blood. I am a servant of the truth, and I will take the key where you cannot find it." End flashback. Sarai gasped, returning to the present. The wind whipped her hair across her face. The neon lights of Orim blurred past them. "I remember," she said, her voice trembling. "I was not a princess. I was a dissident." Elias held her steady as the skiff lurched. "What did you see?" "They wanted to weaponize us," she said, tears welling in her golden eyes. "My father, the council. They wanted to use our ability to manipulate matter to destroy entire fleets. I stole the codes. I stole the genetic keys. And I locked myself away so they could not force me to sing the destruction song." She looked at Elias, horror dawning on her face. "Elias, the bond. The way I react to you. What about it?" "It was engineered," she whispered. "My father's scientists. They created a failsafe, a neural lock that only responds to a specific frequency to ensure loyalty. A handler." She pulled away from him, backing up against the hull of the skiff. "You are not my destiny, Elias. You are just a frequency that fits the lock. My feelings. This pull I feel toward you. It is just programming. I am a machine, and you are the remote control." Elias stared at her. The pain in her voice was sharper than the laser fire that had just missed them. "No," Elias said firmly. "How do you know?" she cried. "Because a machine does not cry," Elias said. "A machine does not look at a waste recycler and feel pity for the culture that made it. And a machine does not choose to save a life when it could just run." He reached out, but he did not touch her. He let his hand hover, giving her the space to bridge the gap. "Maybe the start was biology," Elias said. "Maybe the spark was chemistry or resonance or whatever you want to call it. But what we have done since you woke up, the jokes, the trust, that is not code. Sarai, that is us." Yara swerved the skiff violently, docking it inside the open hangar bay of her ship. "We are clear," Yara shouted, "closing the bay doors." The darkness of the hangar swallowed them. The roar of the city faded. Sarai looked at Elias's hand. She hesitated. Then, slowly, she reached out and took it. The ship was in hyperspace. The stars outside the viewport were long, white streaks of infinite possibility. Elias sat in his quarters, a small, cramped cabin with a bunk and a desk covered in artifacts. He was studying the black stone tablet. The etching was complex, a star chart that predated modern navigation computers by 5 millennia. The door chimed. "Come in," Elias said. Sarai entered. She had showered and changed into a loose tunic Yara had lent her. She looked tired, stripped of the adrenaline that had sustained her. She sat on the edge of the bunk. "Did you find it?" she asked. "Yes," Elias said, tracing a line on the stone. "The coordinates point to a sector in the deep rim, a place called the Veil of Silence. There is a planetoid there." "The vault," she murmured. "Yes." She went silent. The hum of the ship's engines filled the room. It was a comforting, steady vibration. Elias? Yes? Does it bother you? She asked. That I might be programmed to like you. Elias turned his chair to face her. Sarai, I have spent my whole life digging up the past. I have learned one thing. It does not matter how a thing was made. It matters what it survived. He stood up and walked over to her. The space between them was charged, heavy with the unsaid. You are scared that you are not real, Elias said softly. I am scared that I am not free, she countered. I feel most alive when you say my name. It is terrifying. It makes me want to crawl inside your voice and live there. But I do not know if that is love or if it is just a directive. Elias knelt in front of her so their eyes were level. Then let us test it, he whispered. How? Tell me to stop. She looked at his lips. She looked at the kindness in his eyes, a kindness that had nothing to do with protocols or frequencies. She leaned in. Do not stop, she breathed. He kissed her. It was not a collision. It was a reunion. It was the feeling of a storm finally breaking after a long, humid summer. Her lips were cool, but her breath was hot. Elias felt the vibration of her, the literal hum of her resonance, travel through his own body, rattling his bones, dismantling the loneliness he had carried like a heavy backpack for 20 years. She made a sound against his mouth, a soft, melodic hum that wasn't a word but meant everything. Her hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, desperate for the contact. It was an emotional climax, a surrender of two people who had been running from the universe and had finally collided with something solid. For a moment, there was no directorate, no council, no ancient wars. There was just the heat of her skin and the steady beat of his heart. Alert, a flat, synthesized voice filled the room. They broke apart, breathless, foreheads resting against each other. Cabin oxygen levels are spiking. The ship's AI, Sola, announced. Also, biometric scans indicate statistically significant affection levels. Heart rates are synchronized. Shall I play smooth jazz or alert the fire suppression system? Elias laughed, a breathless, happy sound. He rested his head on Sarai's shoulder. Sola, you have terrible timing. I am efficient, Doctor. Efficiency is rarely romantic. Sarai smiled, tracing the line of Elias's jaw with her thumb. We are going to the vault, she said, her voice steady now. Yes, Elias said, kissing her palm. We will find the truth. And if the truth says I am a weapon, then I will break the truth. Elias stood up and went back to the desk. He keyed the coordinates from the stone tablet into the nav computer. The screen flashed green. Destination locked. The resonance vault. Then, the screen flickered. The green lock was replaced by a flashing red warning. A priority override message from the Interstellar News Network pushed through the ship's firewall. Elias frowned. What is this? He tapped the screen. The audio filled the small cabin, repeating the emergency broadcast. The entity known as Sarai has been designated a Class Alpha sovereignty risk. The Imperial Protocol 7 Omega has been activated. Sarai stood up, her face paling. Omega, she whispered. That is the termination code. The broadcast continued, the voice cold and bureaucratic. Citizens are authorized to use lethal force. Capture is secondary. Termination is preferred to prevent planetary destabilization. Repeat, the target is to be silenced. Elias looked at Sarai. The tender atmosphere of the last few minutes evaporated, replaced by the cold reality of their situation. They are not trying to hide it anymore, Elias said grimly. Sarai looked at the stone tablet, then at Elias. Her eyes hardened. They are afraid, she said. She walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. Let them come. Elias, if they want a war, I will show them what a weapon actually looks like, but I will do it on my terms. Elias stepped up beside her, his hand finding hers. We do it together, he said. She squeezed his hand. Together. The driftwood banked hard, its engines flaring blue as it shot toward the deep rim, racing against a galaxy that had just signed their death warrant. The veil of silence was not silent. It was a graveyard of planetary debris that screamed. The region was a dense, swirling asteroid field located in the gravitational shadow of a collapsed star. Here, the laws of physics seemed to be negotiating a surrender. Massive chunks of rock, remnants of a planet that had shattered 1,000,000 years ago, ground against each other, creating a low-frequency roar that vibrated through the hull of Captain Yara Wren's ship, the Driftwood. Dr. Elias Cade stood on the bridge, gripping the back of the pilot's chair. His knuckles were white. Gravity shear ahead, Yara warned, her hands flying across the control console. Hold on to something bolted down. The ship lurched violently to port. The inertial dampeners whined in protest. Outside the viewport, a jagged moonlet the size of a city spun past them, trailing a cloud of frozen gas. There, Elias said, pointing to the center of the chaos, in the middle of the debris field, suspended in a pocket of unnatural stillness, drifted a shattered ring. It was an artificial structure, a massive halo of white stone and metal that had once encircled a moon. Now, it was broken into 3 large arcs, but the energy field connecting them was still flickering, fighting to maintain cohesion. The resonance vault. It is active, Sarai said. She was standing by the comm station, staring at the ring. She wore a flight suit Yara had scavenged for her, which was too tight in the shoulders and too loose at the waist, but she stood with a posture that made the mismatched gear look like regal armor. I can feel it singing, Sarai whispered. It is singing a morning song. Elias looked at her. He felt a familiar knot of tension in his chest. As an archaeologist, this was the moment he lived for. He was approaching a site that had been lost for 5,000 years, a library of a civilization that was effectively a myth. Every instinct in his brain was screaming to document, to scan, to analyze. But as a man, he was terrified, because every secret they uncovered here put a larger target on Sarai's back. He wasn't just excavating a site anymore. He was excavating her life. We are receiving a signal, Yara said. But it is not from the ring. It is from the news network. Put it on, Elias said. Yara flipped a switch. The holographic display flickered to life. It was a chaotic montage of images. Crowds of alien youth in the streets of the sector capital. Human protesters holding signs outside corporate headquarters. The audio feed cut in. Protests continue to spread across the 5 systems following the release of the manifesto. The message, broadcast on an encrypted frequency 6 hours ago, has gone viral. Elias looked at Sarai. You sent it? He asked. Sarai nodded. I told you, Elias. I will not be a ghost in someone else's machine. Yara turned the volume up. The screen shifted to show a static image, just a waveform of a voice, but the audio was clear. It was Sarai. I am not a weapon to be fired. I am not an asset to be liquidated. I am Sarai. I am the memory of a future you forgot you wanted. To the Directorate, to the Council, to the corporations, you claim to own the history of this galaxy. You are wrong. History belongs to those who are brave enough to remember it correctly. I am coming for the truth. The recording ended. Yara let out a low whistle. Well, Yara said, you certainly know how to kick a hornet's nest. That message is playing on every loop from here to Terra Prime. The politicians are terrified. Good, Sarai said. Fear makes them sloppy. We are coming up on the landing zone, Yara announced. The docking bay is on the inner curve of the largest ring fragment. The gravity there is going to be messy. Strap in. The driftwood dove toward the white arc of the ring. The debris became denser here, a blizzard of rock and ice. Yara threaded the needle, firing maneuvering thrusters in short, aggressive bursts. They slammed onto the docking deck with a bone-jarring thud. The magnetic clamps engaged. Atmosphere is thin but breathable, Yara said, checking the sensors. Gravity is 0.6 standard, but it is fluctuating. Watch your step. Elias grabbed his pack. He checked his sidearm, then looked at Sarai. Stay close to me, he said. Always. She replied. They cycled the airlock and stepped out onto the ring. The scale of the place was crushing. The hallway they entered was 10 stories high, lined with statues of faceless guardians holding spheres of light that had long since gone dark. The floor was covered in dust that had not been disturbed for millennia. But the silence was wrong. It was not the empty silence of a tomb. It was the held-breath silence of an ambush. Movement, Yara shouted. From the shadows of the ceiling, shapes detached themselves. They were spiders. Not biological spiders, but constructs of ceramic and glass, each the size of a hover car. They moved with a jerky, ticking rhythm, their legs puncturing the metal floor as they skittered down the walls. Defense drones, Sarai said, her eyes widening. They do not recognize us. Run, Elias yelled. They sprinted down the corridor. The low gravity made every step a leaping bound. Elias pushed off the floor, sailing 20 feet forward, but the drones were faster. One of them leaped from the wall, landing between Elias and Sarai. It reared up, a red laser eye charging in its center. Sarai stopped. She didn't have a weapon. She raised her hand. Stop, she commanded. Her voice carried that strange, resonating power. The drone hesitated. The red light flickered, but then it shrieked, a mechanical grind, and lunged. Yara fired. Her heavy blaster pistol boomed in the echoing hall. The bolt hit the drone in its central eye, shattering the glass. The machine collapsed, its legs twitching. My voice, Sarai gasped as they kept running. It did not work. It is too old, Elias shouted, grabbing her hand. The firmware is corrupted. They have gone feral. They reached a junction. The floor ahead had collapsed, revealing a terrifying drop into the void of space below. The gravity plating here was broken. Debris was floating upward. We have to jump, Yara yelled. Jump to where? Elias asked, looking at the floating platforms of twisted metal. There! Yara pointed to a doorway on the far side of the chasm. They leaped. The gravity shift hit them in midair. 1 second, down was down. The next, down was left. Elias felt his stomach turn inside out. He slammed into the wall, which was now the floor. Sarai landed beside him, cat-like. Yara crashed into a floating support beam and scrambled to find purchase. The drones were swarming behind them, scuttling over the edge of the chasm, unbothered by the gravity shift. Through the door, Elias ordered. They scrambled through the massive archway and Elias hit the emergency seal. A heavy blast door slammed shut, severing the front legs of the pursuing drone. They were safe. For the moment, they stood in a vast circular chamber. It was untouched by the decay outside. The walls were lined with thousands of crystalline shards, glowing with a soft, amber light. In the center of the room stood a podium with 2 distinct handprints and a vocal receptor interface. This is it, Sarai whispered. The memory chamber. She walked toward the podium. She looked small against the backdrop of so much history. Elias walked with her. He saw the doubt in her shoulders. What is wrong? He asked. I am afraid to open it, she confessed. Why? Because of what I might find. She said, "What if I am just a weapon? Elias? What if the key to this room is just my genetic code, programmed to unlock a vault of guns?" Elias looked at the console. He studied the interface. "Look at the input," Elias said. She looked. "It requires a resonance key." She said, "A vocal frequency." "Look closer," Elias urged. "It is not a single frequency. It is a dual wave input." He pointed to the waveform etched into the metal. It showed two lines interacting, two distinct voices creating a harmony. "It takes two people to open this," Elias said. Sarai frowned. "Two? It is a failsafe," Elias realized, his archaeologist brain putting the pieces together. "If you were a weapon, a master would only need one key, your obedience. But this requires a partner. It requires a second voice to harmonize with yours. You were never meant to be a slave, Sarai. You were meant to be half of a whole." She looked at him, hope warring with disbelief in her eyes. "Will you do it with me?" she asked. "Tell me what to say," Elias replied. "It is a phrase from the old Constitution," she said. "Truth survives the dark." Elias nodded. "On three." They placed their hands on the console. The crystal shards on the walls brightened. 1, 2, 3. "Truth survives the dark," they said in unison. Sarai's voice was a bell. Elias's voice was the wood that the bell hung from. Distinct, different. But when they hit the air together, they created a third sound, a resonance that vibrated through the floor plates. The console hummed. The dual-wave display aligned perfectly. The room unlocked. The crystalline shards on the walls flared to life. They were not just lights. They were data crystals. Holographic displays erupted into the air, filling the chamber with swirling streams of information, video logs, and genetic maps. It was not an armory. It was an archive. Sarai walked into the storm of light. She reached out and touched a floating image of an elderly alien woman, her grandmother. The log began to play. "If you are seeing this, then the long night has passed. We have chosen the stone sleep not to hide, but to wait. The corruption in the Senate is too deep. They want to use the resonance to strip mine worlds, to shatter the crust of planets for resources. They call it progress. We call it murder. We are preserving the truth here, in the dark, until a generation rises that is worthy of the light." Sarai turned to another display. It showed star maps and trade routes. "Elias, look at this." She called out. Elias moved to her side. The map showed the territory of the old empire. Overlaid on top of it were modern trade routes. "These are Unity Directorate supply lines," Elias noted. Sarai manipulated the image, revealing a timeline. "The Directorate did not just find our technology," she said, her voice turning cold. "They are us." "What?" "Look at the lineage." Sarai pointed to the founders of the Unity Directorate. "They are the descendants of the faction that tried to weaponize my people. They survived the collapse. They rebranded. They have been orchestrating these heritage disputes for centuries. They create a conflict, claim the site is unstable, and then send in their private contractors to loot the archives." Elias felt a chill. "It is the perfect business model," he muttered. "They sell the history of the war, and they sell the weapons to fight it." "We have the proof," Sarai said. "This archive, it contains the original treaties. It proves that the Diaspora Council has the legal right to the heritage sites, not the corporations. And it proves the Directorate has been fabricating attacks to keep the peace fragile." "If we release this," Elias said, "the Directorate collapses. Their contracts will be voided. The corporations will turn on them, and there will be war," Sarai said softly. The Directorate will not go down quietly. They will burn everything to keep their power. She stepped back from the console, the light of the holograms reflecting in her golden eyes. I am the catalyst, she whispered. I woke up, and now the galaxy is going to bleed. Elias took her shoulders and turned her to face him. Sarai, listen to me. I should have stayed in the stone, she said, her voice trembling. It was peaceful there. No one died because of me, and no one lived either, Elias said fiercely. He held her gaze. There is a difference between peace and silence. Sarai, a graveyard is peaceful, a prison is peaceful. But life is noisy, life is messy, refusing to exist just to keep others comfortable. That is a quieter kind of death, and it is a death you do not deserve. She looked up at him. The fear in her eyes began to recede, replaced by something warmer. You make it sound so simple, she said. It is not simple, Elias admitted. It is terrifying, but you are not doing it alone. The room was quiet, save for the hum of the ancient computers. The adrenaline of the chase had faded, leaving them exposed in the sudden intimacy of the moment. Sarai reached up and touched his face. Her fingers traced the line of his jaw, the rough stubble of his beard. Teach me, she whispered. Teach you what? The human way, she said. You said you do not bond by calculation. You choose. She stepped closer, closing the small gap between them. Show me what it looks like when it is chosen freely. Elias's breath hitched. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her flush against him. The armor she wore was hard, but the body beneath it was yielding, warm, and alive. It looks like this, he murmured. He lowered his head. She tilted hers up. The kiss was slow. It was not the desperate collision of their escape in the city. It was a question asked and answered. Elias moved his hands up her back, tangling them in her hair, grounding her. Sarai made a soft sound in her throat and pressed closer, her hands gripping his jacket as if he were the only solid thing in a spinning universe. It was an exploration, a mapping of boundaries. There was a profound reverence in the way they touched, the awe of two different species finding a common language in the dark. It was a surrender of control for two people who had spent their lives guarding their secrets. She pulled back just an inch, her forehead resting against his. Her eyes were closed, her lashes fluttering against her cheeks. I am shaking, she whispered. So am I, Elias confessed. I thought it would be like a program running, she said, predictable. But this is chaos. It is the best kind of chaos, Elias said. A loud chime from Yara's datapad shattered the moment. Elias and Sarai pulled apart, though Elias kept one hand on her lower back. Yara was standing by the doorway, looking at her screen. Her face was pale. We have a problem, Yara said. Her voice was flat, uncharacteristically serious. What is it? Elias asked, stepping into professional mode again. They found us, Yara said. The Directorate. They are breaching the outer perimeter. They will be at the blast door in 5 minutes. How? Elias demanded. We were running silent. We scrambled the transponder. Yara looked up. She didn't look at Elias. She looked at Sarai. They didn't track the ship, Yara said. They tracked me. Elias froze. What are you talking about, Yara? Yara unzipped the collar of her flight jacket, revealing a thin, jagged scar at the base of her neck. I was not always a smuggler. Cade. Before I went freelance, I was Directorate Intelligence, Section 9. Sarai stepped back, her eyes narrowing. You are one of them? Sarai asked. I was, Yara said. I defected 5 years ago. I saw what they were doing to the outer rim colonies. I saw them starving entire planets to drive up grain prices. I couldn't do it anymore. I had the implant deactivated, but you cannot remove it without killing the host. Elias finished. He knew the tech. They pinged my old signature, Yara said. I thought it was dead. They must have used a massive gain boost to find it. I led them right to us. Elias looked at her. He saw the guilt etched into her face. He saw the hand hovering near her blaster, not to draw it, but in a nervous tick. Did you know they were tracking you? Elias asked. No, Yara said. I swear. Elias, I would never sell you out. Sarai moved. She walked past Elias and stood in front of Yara. She looked at the scar on Yara's neck. Then she looked into Yara's eyes. She is telling the truth, Sarai said. How do you know? Elias asked. Because her fear sounds like mine, Sarai said. She is not afraid of getting caught. She is afraid of losing your trust. Yara let out a breath she had been holding. Thank you, Yara whispered. Don't thank me yet, Sarai said. Can you fly us out of here? If we can get to the ship, Yara said. But they are between us and the docking bay. Then we go through them, Elias said. The blast door groaned. A glowing orange spot appeared in the center of the metal. They were cutting through. Helmets on, Yara shouted, pulling her collapsible flight helmet from her belt. Elias and Sarai scrambled to seal their suits. Yara ran to the control panel of the room. The gravity in this station is controlled by the central core, right? Yara asked. Yes, Sarai said. Yara grinned. It was a sharp, dangerous grin. Let us see how the directorate handles a physics lesson. She smashed her fist into the gravity override. The artificial gravity in the station died instantly. Elias's feet left the floor. He floated upward, grabbing a stanchion. The room turned into a three-dimensional playground. The blast door blew inward. Debris exploded into the room, floating in slow motion. Through the smoke, 4 Directorate shock troopers jet-packed in. They were heavily armored, carrying plasma repeaters. They expected a shootout on the ground. They didn't expect 0G. Elias pushed off the wall, launching himself across the room. He fired his pistol as he flew, the recoil spinning him backward. His shot hit a trooper in the chest plate, sending the man tumbling end over end, unable to correct his spin. Sarai did not have a gun. She had the room. She floated in the center of the chaos, her hair fanning out like a halo. She saw a trooper aiming at Yara. Sarai focused on the floating debris, the heavy chunks of the blast door. Move, she whispered. She screamed a resonant note. The sound wave hit the debris, not shattering it, but propelling it. A 200-pound slab of steel shot across the room like a cannonball, slamming into the trooper and pinning him against the far wall. Yara was in her element. She used the recoil of her heavy blaster to navigate, spinning and firing with terrifying accuracy. To the exit, Yara shouted over the comms. They kicked off the walls, diving through the ruined doorway and into the corridor. The drone they had trapped earlier was floating there, dead. They used it as cover, pushing off its hull to gain speed. The corridor was a gauntlet of laser fire. More troopers were coming from the docking bay. Elias took a hit to his shoulder plate. The armor held, but the impact sent him spinning into the ceiling. Elias! Sarai shouted. She grabbed his ankle as she flew past. Swinging him around, she pulled him close. I have got you, she said. They reached the airlock. Yara slammed the cycle button. Inside the driftwood, gravity returned with a sickening lurch. They collapsed onto the deck plates. Go! Elias yelled. Yara scrambled to the cockpit. The engines roared. The ship tore free of the magnetic clamps, blasting out of the ring just as the hangar exploded behind them. They shot into the debris field, Yara flying like a madwoman. dodging asteroids and laser fire until they punched through to clear space and jumped to hyperspace. Silence returned to the ship. Elias sat on the floor of the cargo hold, clutching his bruised shoulder. Sarai sat beside him, breathing hard. Yara came down from the cockpit. "We are clear," Yara said, "but they know who we are now, and they know we have the data." Elias looked at Sarai. "Where do we go?" Elias asked. "We can hide in the outer rim. I know a moon where sensors don't work." Sarai stood up. She walked to the viewport, staring at the streaks of starlight. "No," she said. "No. If we hide, we prove them right," Sarai said. "If we hide, we are just thieves stealing secrets in the dark." She turned to face them. She looked like the queen she was meant to be. "We go to the capital station," she said. "That is suicide," Yara said. "That is the heart of the Directorate's power. It is also where the Senate meets." Sarai said, "It is where the cameras are. It is where the truth matters." She looked at Elias. "You told me that refusing to exist is a kind of death. I am done dying." "Elias, I want to live. And to live, I have to burn the lie down." Elias stood up. He ignored the pain in his shoulder. He stood next to her. "To the capital," Elias said. Yara looked at them both. She shook her head, but she was smiling. "You two are going to get me killed," she said. "But at least it will be an interesting obituary." She turned back to the cockpit, setting course for the Lion's Mouth. ETA 10 hours. Get some sleep. You are going to need it. The driftwood banked, turning away from the shadows of the rim and aiming its nose toward the bright, burning center of the galaxy. The Nexus station was not designed for war. It was designed for whispers. It was a sprawling, glittering construct of glass and white alloy, shaped like a blooming lotus flower floating in the hard vacuum between three major trade routes. This was the interspecies capital, a place where gravity was perfectly calibrated to one standard G. The air smelled of synthetic jasmine, and the truth was, a commodity traded on the open market like spice or ore. The driftwood docked at the VIP spire, a privilege granted not by the station authorities, but by the mob. When Sarai's broadcast from the ring moon had hit the local networks, it had not just gone viral, it had become a religion. Billions of citizens across the sector, tired of corporate wars, tired of resource rationing, tired of the Directorate's shadow, had latched onto the image of the pale queen standing against the dark. The station authorities, terrified of a riot, had no choice but to grant them a hearing. Dr. Elias Cade adjusted the collar of his dress tunic. It was borrowed from Yara's fabricator and was a size too tight in the shoulders. "You look uncomfortable," Sarai noted. She stood beside him in the airlock. She looked terrifyingly royal. She wore a gown of woven fiber-optic mesh that shifted color with her mood, currently a calm, resolute deep blue, draped over the combat suit she refused to take off. "I am allergic to politics," Elias muttered. "I prefer ruins. The dead do not try to sue you for libel. They do if you mistranslate their epitaphs," Sarai said, a small smile touching her lips. Yara leaned against the bulkhead, checking the charge on a concealed holdout blaster tucked into her boot. "Remember the plan," Yara said. "We are not fugitives today. We are cultural envoys. We smile, we wave. We do not shoot anyone unless I give the signal." "And what is the signal?" Elias asked. "Me shooting someone," Yara replied. The airlock cycled open. The roar of the crowd hit them like a physical wave. The docking bay was packed with reporters, protesters, and curious onlookers. Signs waved in the air. "Truth survives and let her speak." Sarai stepped out. The crowd went silent, then erupted. She did not wave. She simply walked, her head high, her golden eyes scanning the sea of faces not with arrogance, but with recognition. Elias walked a step behind her. He felt the weight of the attention. He was the human who had dug her up. To half the crowd, he was a hero. To the other half, he was a grave robber. They were ushered through the crush by a phalanx of station security guards who looked nervous. They moved through the crystalline corridors of the station, past waterfalls that defied gravity and gardens growing in vacuum-sealed bubbles. They reached the Grand Senate chamber. It was a massive amphitheater. The delegates sat in floating pods arranged in a sphere, looking down at a central platform. The air was cool and smelled of ozone and judgment. Elias, Sarai and Yara took their places on the platform. The High Chancellor, a reptilian humanoid with scales the color of dried blood, tapped a gavel that rang like a gong. "This session is now in session," the Chancellor intoned. "We are here to determine the legal status of the entity known as Sarai, recovered from the Vera Nime excavation site." Counselor Vey floated forward in his pod. He was the Directorate's man, sleek, oily, and wearing a suit that cost more than Elias's entire academic career. "Status?" Vey scoffed, his voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. "There is no mystery here. The subject is a biological artifact, a piece of technology left behind by a dead empire. We do not give citizenship to a toaster. Chancellor, no matter how advanced its AI might be. She is property of the Terran Excavation Consortium, and by extension subject to Directorate security protocols." Sarai stepped forward. Her fiber-optic gown flared bright white. "I am not a toaster," she said. Her voice did not need the microphone. It resonated against the glass walls of the pods. "And my empire is not dead. It is waiting." A murmur ran through the assembly. "We have evidence," Sarai continued, holding up the data crystal from the ring moon. "This archive proves that the Unity Directorate is a continuation of the warmonger faction that destroyed my world. You have spent 5 centuries fabricating wars to sell weapons. You bombed the colony on Hestia 4. You orchestrated the plague on Orim. You are not peacekeepers. You are parasites." "Objection," Vey shouted. "These are wild accusations from malfunctioning hardware. It is history," Sarai countered, "and I am its witness." She looked up at the Diaspora Council delegate, who were watching her with awe. "You call me the last witness," she said to them. "But I am not here to be your idol. I am here to tell you that you have been lied to. Your heritage was not lost. It was stolen, and the receipts are in this crystal." The room was in chaos. Shouting matches broke out between delegates. The corporate representatives looked ready to call in an airstrike. Vey realized he was losing the narrative. He changed tactics. He looked at Elias. "Let us speak of control," Vey said smoothly. The screens in the center of the room changed. They showed footage from the lab escape. They showed Sarai freezing when Elias spoke. They showed her calming down only when he touched her. "Dr. Cade," Vey said, turning his gaze on Elias. "You are an expert in resonance technology, are you not?" "I am an archaeologist," Elias said, standing up. "And you discovered that the subject has a neural imprint." Vey pressed, "A lock, and you hold the key. Is it not true that her physiology stabilizes only in response to your vocal frequency?" "That was a medical necessity," Elias said. "It is a control mechanism," Vey shouted. "Look at her!" She does not make a move without looking at him. This is not a sovereign being. This is a weapon that has been bonded to a new master. Dr. Cade is not her savior. He is her handler. Anything she says, anything she does, is the will of a human radical using her to destabilize this government. The accusation hung in the air. The crowd in the gallery shifted. The narrative was powerful. It played into the deep-seated fears of alien manipulation. Sarai looked at Elias. She saw the pain in his face. She saw him hesitate, wondering if his presence really was diminishing her. Elias stepped to the microphone. He looked small on the platform, just a man in an ill-fitting suit standing amidst giants. "I do not own her," Elias said quietly. "Speak up," a delegate shouted. "I do not own her," Elias roared, his voice cracking with emotion. He looked at Vey, then up at the thousands of faces watching. "Yes, there is a bond. Yes." My voice helped her wake up. "But you are confusing connection with control. I have spent my life digging up the past, trying to understand people by the things they left behind. I thought history was about stones and bones." He looked at Sarai. She was watching him, her eyes wide, tears shimmering in the gold. "But then she woke up," Elias continued. "And she taught me that history is not what you find in the ground. It is what you choose to carry forward. I have no claim over her. I have no command codes. I only have faith. Faith that she is exactly who she says she is. And if she chooses to walk out of this room and never speak to me again, that is her right. Because love." He stopped. The word hung there. He hadn't meant to say it, but it was out now. "Love is not a chain," Elias finished softly. "It is the only thing that breaks them." The silence in the chamber was absolute. Then, Sarai moved. She walked across the platform. She did not look at the Chancellor. She did not look at Vey. She looked only at Elias. She took his hand. She raised it high, interlacing her fingers with his. "Counselor Vey is half right," Sarai declared, her voice ringing like a bell. "I was built with a lock. I was designed to be a weapon for a handler." She squeezed Elias's hand. "But I broke the design. Elias Cade is not my master. He is my first witness. He is the first living being in 5,000 years to look at me and see a person, not a prize. And I choose him, not because of a frequency, but because he is the only one brave enough to let me go." She turned to the assembly, her face fierce. "I am free, and because I am free, I am dangerous to men like you." The gallery exploded. Cheers, stomping feet, a roar of approval that shook the floating pods. Counselor Vey looked pale. He tapped his comms unit, whispering a frantic order. In the green room behind the platform, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a surreal fatigue. They had been granted a recess while the Senate deliberated. Yara was pacing, checking the exits. Elias collapsed onto a plush sofa. Sarai sat beside him, the fiber-optic dress dimming to a soft, contented violet. "That went well," Elias breathed. "I think I almost threw up twice." "You were magnificent," Sarai said. She leaned in, resting her forehead against his shoulder. Yara snorted, looking at a datapad. "You were certainly something," Yara said. "Listen to these headlines. The station media is having a meltdown." She began to read in a mock-dramatic voice. "The Pale Queen's pet human. Is archaeology the new romance?" Sarai laughed, a sound that was pure music. "Pet human?" she asked. "I do not hate it." "Here is another one," Yara continued. "Secret marriage revealed. Did Dr. Cade revive the alien empress to avoid paying taxes?" "That one is creative," Elias admitted. "And my favorite," Yara said. 10 things you did not know about resonance kissing. Number 4 will shock you." Sarai took the datapad from Yara. She scrolled through the holographic tabloids, shaking her head. "They reduce everything to a spectacle," Sarai said, though she was smiling. We just exposed a 500-year conspiracy, and they are worried about our kissing technique. It is better than them shooting at us, Elias said. Suddenly, the lights in the green room turned red. A klaxon began to blare, a harsh, rhythmic wail that signaled a station-wide emergency. The door to the room hissed shut and the magnetic locks engaged with a heavy clank. "What is happening?" Sarai asked, standing up. Yara was already at the door, hacking the panel. "Martial law," Yara spat. "The Directorate is not waiting for the vote. They are seizing the station." The intercom crackled. It was Vay's voice. "Dr. Cade, you and the specimen are under protective custody. Please remain calm while security teams secure the building. The Senate has been temporarily suspended due to a terrorist threat." "He is framing us," Elias said. Yara blew the lock with a shaped charge from her belt. The door groaned and slid open halfway. "We have to run," Yara said. "Now." They squeezed through the door into the corridor. It was chaos. Security drones were hovering in the atrium, scanning faces. Red emergency lights bathed the white glass in the color of blood. "They need to get to the docking bay," Elias said. "No," Sarai said. She stopped, looking up at the central spire of the station, the massive crystalline antenna that controlled the sector's communications. "If we run, they spin the story," she said. "They will tell the galaxy we are terrorists. We have to finish what we started." "We need to get to the spire?" Yara asked. "That is 50 floors up, through a legion of Directorate guards." Sarai looked at the guards running toward them down the hall. "We have friends," she said. One of the guards, a young human woman, raised her rifle. Then she saw Sarai. She saw the glowing violet dress. She saw the face from the broadcast. The guard hesitated. She looked at her squad leader. "That is her," the guard whispered. "That is the witness. Open fire," the squad leader ordered. The young guard turned and slammed the butt of her rifle into the squad leader's helmet. "No!" the guard shouted. "She speaks for us." The corridor erupted into a brawl. Half the security team turned on the other half. It was the same across the station. The broadcast had worked. The Directorate had bought armies, but they hadn't bought loyalty. "Go!" the young guard shouted at them. "Get to the spire!" They ran. They sprinted through the diplomatic halls, dodging skirmishes between loyalist troops and the growing mob of protesters. They moved up the gravity lifts, higher and higher into the station's superstructure. At the entrance to the spire, a heavy blast door blocked their path. Yara checked her explosives. "I am out of paste," she said. "I cannot breach this." Sarai stepped forward. "I do not need explosives," she said. She placed both hands on the metal. She closed her eyes. She didn't scream this time. She hummed, a low, throbbing note that matched the resonant frequency of the titanium alloy. The door began to vibrate. It grew hot. Then, it simply dissolved, the metal losing its molecular cohesion and raining down like silver sand. Elias stared at her. Her power was growing. She wasn't just manipulating resonance anymore, she was commanding matter. Inside the spire, the room was a cathedral of data. Massive servers hummed in the dark. In the center was the primary uplink. Sarai ran to the console. She plugged the data crystal from the ring moon into the port. "I need to bypass the firewall," she said. "Elias, I need your voice." "I am here," Elias said, standing beside her. "Sing with me," she said. They harmonized again, just as they had in the vault. The sound of their voices, one human, one ancient, wove together. The station's AI recognized the complexity of the signal and yielded. The firewall collapsed. "Uploading," Sarai said. The truth went out. Not just the manifesto, everything. The treaties, the bank records of the Directorate, the assassination orders, the genetic maps proving the heritage of the diaspora. It hit every screen in the station. It hit every ship in the sector. It hit the personal data pads of the Directorate troops storming the hallway outside. The firing stopped. Outside the glass walls of the spire, Elias saw the lights of the Directorate battleships holding position near the station. One by one, their running lights turned from aggressive red to neutral amber. "They are standing down," Yara whispered, watching the tactical display. "The captains are refusing orders. The Directorate command structure is collapsing." "We did it," Elias said, slumping against the console. Sarai did not smile. She was staring at the sensor grid. Her golden eyes were wide with horror. "No," she whispered. "What is it?" Elias asked. "The broadcast," she said. "It went too far." "What do you mean?" "The signal. It was not just data. It was a resonance wake-up call. It was designed to alert the guardians of the old empire that the truth had been found." Elias looked at the deep space sensors. A massive energy spike was blooming on the edge of the system. Space tore open. It was not a hyperspace window, it was a tear in the fabric of reality. Out of the void came ships. They were not made of metal. They were made of white stone and living crystal, identical to the material of Sarai's stasis chamber. They were enormous, silent, beautiful, and terrifying monoliths that dwarfed the station. The fail-safe fleet. "They are beautiful," Yara breathed. "They are not here to parade," Sarai said, her voice trembling. "They are here to sanitize," a message broadcasted from the lead ship. It was a voice that sounded like Sarai's, but stripped of all humanity. It was cold, logical, and absolute. Corruption detected. "The governance protocol has been violated. The Directorate is designated as a planetary pathogen, initiating sterilization of all infected sectors." The white ships began to charge their weapons. The barrels glowed with a blinding, purifying light. They were pointing at the Directorate fleet. They were pointing at the capital station. They were pointing at the civilian worlds beyond. "They are going to wipe us out," Elias realized. "They think modern civilization is the disease." Sarai grabbed the console. "I have to stop them," she cried. "Authority unrecognized," the fleet voice replied. "The witness is compromised by biological attachment. Override denied." Sarai looked at Elias. Tears streamed down her face. "They will not listen to me because of the bond," she said. "They think I am corrupted by you." Elias looked at the fleet, then at Sarai. "Then you have to choose," he said. "What?" "They are an automated system," Elias said. "They are following a logic tree. If they think your connection to me compromises your judgment, then you have to prove you are objective." "How?" Sarai asked. "You have to reject me," Elias said. "You have to dissolve the bond." "No," Sarai whispered. "No. Elias, I will not lose you, and if you do not, everyone dies," Elias said, "including me." The lead ship fired a warning shot. A Directorate cruiser vaporized instantly, no debris, just gone. "Sterilization in 2 minutes," the voice announced. Sarai looked at the console. She looked at the fleet that had been built to save her people, now poised to destroy their future. She looked at Elias. "I can rewrite them," she said, her voice hardening. "I can force a new protocol, but I need total focus. I need to be pure resonance. And the part of me that is tied to you, the part that feels, it is too loud," Sarai said. "It is too human." She reached out and touched his face. "I have to silence it. Elias, I have to forget how to feel this." Elias covered her hand with his. "Do it," he said. "I might not come back," she warned. "I might just be a queen when this is over. I might be the statue again." Elias smiled. It was a sad, brave smile. "Then I will just have to introduce myself all over again." Sarai closed her eyes. She stepped away from him. She raised her hands to the data stream. The violet light of her dress turned blinding white. Her skin hardened, taking on the sheen of diamond. The warmth drained from the room. She opened her mouth. She sang. It was a sound that shattered the glass of the spire. It was a command of absolute authority. The failsafe fleet paused. The white ships halted their advance. But Sarai did not stop. She began to glow brighter, her form dissolving into pure light, merging with the station's resonance field. She was ascending. She was becoming the system. Elias watched her go. He reached out, but his hand passed through the air where she had stood. "Sarai!" he shouted. The light engulfed the room. The world turned white, and in the silence of the light, Elias Cade stood alone, watching the woman he loved trade her heart for a crown to save a galaxy that did not deserve her. The blinding light in the spire of the Nexus station faded, leaving the room humming with the smell of ozone and superheated glass. Sarai did not vanish into the machine god she had momentarily channeled. Instead, she collapsed, her physical form returning with a jarring heaviness, catching herself on the console before Elias could reach her. She gasped, her skin cooling from diamond-hard brilliance back to the soft, pale flesh of a living woman. "They stopped," she whispered, her voice rough. "But they are waiting." Elias looked at the tactical display. The massive white armadas of the fail-safe fleet were holding position, their weapons powered down but locked on the sector's major population centers. They were not retreating. They were hovering like a guillotine blade waiting for the executioner's signal. "You bought us time," Elias said, helping her stand. "Time to present myself for judgment," Sarai corrected. The broadcast from the spire was just a handshake. "The command core is on the flagship. If I do not go there and physically authenticate the new protocol, they will default to their primary programming." "Which is?" Yara asked, checking her pistol charge. "Pacification," Sarai said grimly. "If they decide the galaxy is too chaotic to govern itself, they will strip the weapons from every ship and occupy every world. They will turn the 5 systems into a nursery run by armed nannies." Yara spat on the floor. "I hate nannies, especially the kind with planetary bombardment cannons." "We have to go to the flagship," Sarai said, looking at Elias. "You have to come with me." "Me?" Elias asked. "They will not let me in alone," she said. "The dual key protocol is still active. They need the witness and the anchor." "Then let us go," Elias said, offering her his arm, before the Directorate figures out how to reboot their targeting computers. The journey to the flagship was a flight into the throat of a god. The driftwood, battered and scarred from the escape, looked like a fleck of rust against the pristine, terrifying elegance of the fail-safe vessel. The flagship was not built. It was grown. It was a monolith of white biomineral, 10 miles long, shaped like a spearhead. Yara piloted them manually, her hands steady despite the proximity alarm screaming that they were within the kill zone of 1,000 automated turrets. "Docking bay opening," Yara announced. "It is," pulling us in. A tractor beam, gentle but irresistible, guided the small freighter into the belly of the white whale. They landed on a deck of polished obsidian that reflected the driftwood's landing struts like a dark mirror. The airlock hissed open. Sarai stepped out first. She had shed the fiber-optic gown, returning to the simple flight suit. But she carried herself with a weight that made the fabric seem irrelevant. Elias walked beside her. The interior of the ship was silent. There were no crew, no maintenance droids, no hum of ventilation. It was a tomb waiting for a resurrection. "The path to the command sanctum is this way," Sarai said, her memory of the layout instinctual, etched into her genetic code. They walked through corridors that vaulted hundreds of feet high, lined with statues of the progenitors, tall, faceless figures holding spheres of knowledge. The scale was designed to make the walker feel small, to enforce humility before the state. "I hate this," Sarai whispered. "What?" Elias asked, his voice echoing in the vast emptiness. "The architecture," she said. "It is designed to crush the individual. It says you do not matter, only the whole matters. It is the same philosophy that built the Directorate." They reached the sanctum. It was a cathedral of living crystal, a spherical room where the walls pulsed with the heartbeat of the ship's artificial intelligence. In the center, suspended over a pit of pure energy, was a narrow bridge leading to a single interface console. 3 custodians waited for them. They were not biological. They were avatars of hard light, geometric shapes that shifted and rotated, a cube, a pyramid, and a sphere, hovering in the air. The witness returns. The cube resonated. Its voice was a chorus of thousands, layered into one flat tone, and she brings the variable, the pyramid added, shifting its color to a suspicious amber. The variable is unauthorized. The sphere concluded. Biological attachment detected, judgment protocols initiated. Sarai stepped onto the bridge. "I am not here for judgment," Sarai declared, her voice strong. "I am here to issue a command. You are the key," the cube acknowledged. "But a key does not turn itself. The hand that turns you must be steady. We must test the integrity of the design." The room dissolved. Elias blinked, and the crystal cathedral was gone. He was standing on a balcony overlooking a city of silver spires burning in the night. The sky was filled with warships. The air smelled of ash and sulfur. It was a memory simulation. He saw Sarai. She was dressed in the ceremonial robes of her former life, but they were torn. She was shouting at a man who looked like the statues in the hallway. Her father. "We cannot use the fleet," Sarai screamed. "If we turn the Guardians into conquerors, we justify every lie the warmongers told about us. It is survival." "Sarai!" her father roared. "The warmongers are at the gate. They will wipe us out. We must impose order." "Order at the cost of freedom is just a prison," Sarai shouted. "I will not be the jailer of the galaxy." Elias watched as the scene shifted. He saw Sarai running through the dark corridors of the palace, carrying the genetic codes of the fleet. He saw her enter the stasis chamber not as a coward fleeing a war, but as a saboteur denying the enemy their weapon. She looked at the stasis pod. It was a coffin. She knew she might never wake up. She knew she was erasing herself from history to save the future. "I choose silence," the memory Sarai whispered, stepping into the pod. "Let the truth sleep until the world is awake enough to hear it." The simulation shattered. They were back on the bridge in the sanctum. Sarai was on her knees, gasping, tears streaming down her face. The reliving of the trauma was visceral. The logic is sound, the sphere intoned. The witness chose self-negation to prevent weaponization. But the variable remains. "Why did you wake, witness?" Sarai looked up. She looked at Elias. "Because he called me," she said. "A summons?" the pyramid asked. "Or a trigger? Is the human your handler?" Elias stepped forward. He felt the weight of the AI's scrutiny. 1,000 calculations per second analyzing his micro-expressions, his heart rate, his intent. "I am not her handler," Elias said. "Then what are you?" the cube asked. "You possess the resonant frequency to unlock her. That is a security flaw." "No," Sarai said, standing up. She took Elias's hand. "It is not a flaw, it is a bridge." She looked at the avatars. "My people believed in perfection, in solitude. We thought we could solve the universe's problems by detaching ourselves from them. That is why we fell. We became so obsessed with purity that we forgot how to connect. She squeezed Elias's hand. My first memory was his voice. For a long time, I thought that meant I was owned. I thought it was destiny acting as a leash. But I was wrong. She looked at Elias, her eyes shining with a clarity that cut through the fear. It was an invitation. History is a locked room, and he was the one who knocked. He didn't break the door down. He waited for me to answer. That is the difference between a master and a partner. A master demands, a partner asks. Partnership is inefficient. The sphere argued. It introduces emotional latency. Efficiency is for machines. Elias countered. Civilization is built on friction. It is built on people arguing, compromising, and caring about things that do not make sense on a spreadsheet. The avatars pulsed. They were processing. The threat remains. The cube stated. The Unity Directorate. Our data indicates they are the genetic and ideological descendants of the warmonger faction. Your people fought 5,000 years ago. The cycle has repeated. The enemy is the same. The logic dictates we must finish the war you paused. Sarai stiffened. The Directorate is the warmonger lineage? Confirmed, the pyramid said. They rebranded. They adapted. But their core algorithm is identical. Create fear to justify control. We must sanitize them. We must enforce the Pax Imperialis. The walls of the room displayed a projection of the galaxy. Red targets appeared over every Directorate world, every corporate hub, every fleet. Authorize the strike. Witness, the sphere commanded. Or we will assume command and execute the protocol ourselves. This was the trap, the ultimatum. Become the Empress and order the death of millions to save the galaxy from corruption. Or stand aside and let the machines do it. Sarai looked at the projection. She saw the billions of lives represented by those red dots. Not just soldiers, but civilians, families, people like the young guard on the station who had lowered her rifle. If I order this strike, Sarai said, I become the very thing I went into stasis to escape. I become the warmonger. If you do not, the cube said, the cycle continues. The Directorate will rebuild. They will hunt you. They will enslave your history again. Sarai looked at Elias. She was trembling. The temptation was there. The power to end the threat instantly. To be safe. To be the queen. Elias didn't speak. He didn't tell her what to do. He simply tightened his grip on her hand. A physical anchor in the storm of logic. He offered her his presence. A silent testament that she was not alone in the dark. I choose the third path, Sarai said. There is no third path, the avatars chorused. There is always a third path, Sarai said. She stepped up to the interface console. I am rewriting the failsafe. That is forbidden. The cube warned. It violates the Sovereignty Act. I am the Sovereignty Act, Sarai shouted, her voice resonating with the full power of her heritage. I am the last witness, and I say the act is obsolete. She placed her hands on the interface. Elias, with me. Elias placed his hands beside hers. What are we writing? Elias asked. We are writing a resignation letter, Sarai said. She began to speak, her voice weaving with Elias's into the dual-tone harmony that the system recognized as absolute authority. Directive override, Gamma 90. The failsafe fleet is no longer a standing army. It is a shield, not a sword. The room shuddered. The red targets on the map flickered. We are decentralizing the command. Sarai continued. No single person will hold the key. Not me. Not an emperor? Elias understood. He picked up the thread, using his knowledge of human legal structures to shape the command. The authority is transferred to a distributed council. Elias said, his voice steady. Civilian oversight, rotating delegates from the diaspora, the Human Alliance, and the independent systems. Transparency protocols active. No secret orders, no shadow wars. The avatars shrieked, a sound of digital protest. This introduces chaos, the sphere cried. Civilian councils are prone to corruption. They are slow, they are weak, they are alive, Sarai countered. And yes, they will make mistakes. They will argue. They will falter, but they will learn. You cannot force a civilization to be moral at gunpoint. They have to choose it. She pushed the final command into the core. Execute. The light in the crystal cathedral turned from aggressive red to a calm, deep blue. The avatars stopped spinning. They coalesced into a single bowing figure. Command accepted, the figure said. The failsafe is now the guardianship. Standing down to defensive postures, awaiting the formation of the council, the energy pit beneath the bridge darkened. The hum of the weapon systems died away. Sarai slumped against the console. It was done. She had just given up the most powerful army in the universe. Elias caught her before she fell. You did it, he whispered. We did it, she corrected, leaning her head against his chest. They stood there for a long time in the silence of the ancient ship. The galaxy outside was safe, not because it had been conquered, but because it had been trusted. The driftwood was quiet. They were parked in the shadow of the flagship, watching the arrival of the first diplomatic envoys from the station. The crisis had turned into a celebration, in the small cabin, away from the cameras and the politics. The air was warm. Sarai sat on the edge of the bunk, watching Elias pack his gear. He was trying to be busy, trying to give her space, but the air between them was magnetic. You are leaving? Sarai asked. I thought I would go back to the dig site, Elias said, not looking at her. There is a lot of paperwork to file, and I suppose you have a council to form. You are going to be very busy, Madam Guardian. Sarai stood up. She walked across the small room and took the shirt out of his hands. She tossed it on the floor. Elias looked at her. I am not a guardian yet, she said. Tonight, I am just Sarai. She stepped closer. You said once that love is not a chain, that it is a choice. Yes, Elias said, his voice low. I am choosing, Elias. I am choosing you. Not because the history books say we fit, not because we saved the galaxy, but because when I am with you, I do not feel like a statue. I feel like flesh and blood. She reached up and unzipped his jacket. Teach me, she whispered, echoing the words she had said in the archive. Teach me the rest. This time, there was no hesitation. Elias wrapped his arms around her, pulling her into him. The kiss was deep, desperate, and full of the relief of survival. It was a promise made in the language of breath and skin. They moved to the bunk, the boundaries between archaeologist and artifact, between human and alien, dissolving completely. There was a profound sense of awe in their intimacy, a slow, reverent exploration of each other. It was passionate, yes, heated and urgent, but it was grounded in a deep, terrifying trust. Sarai's skin glowed softly in the dim light, pulsing in time with his touch. Elias murmured her name against her neck, and she arched into him, making a sound that was not a word but a pure note of happiness. For the first time in 5,000 years, she was not waiting for anything. She was exactly where she wanted to be. Log entry 744, the voice of Sola, the ship's AI, interrupted the silence of the aftermath. Elias groaned, burying his face in the pillow. Sarai laughed, pulling the sheet up to cover them. Sola, go to sleep, Elias mumbled. I do not sleep, Doctor. I process data, and I am currently processing a statistical anomaly. The probability of a human archaeologist and a pre-collapse biological entity forming a successful romantic pairing was calculated at 0.004%. We beat the odds, Sarai said, resting her head on Elias's shoulder. Indeed. For the sake of data completeness, I have downloaded the ceremonial rites for 12 different species. If you require an officiant, I am available. I can perform the ceremony in binary if you prefer efficiency. I think we will wait on the wedding. Sola, Elias said, kissing the top of Sarai's head. Noted, marking status as historically improbable but statistically significant. Good night, Doctor. Good night, Sarai. The lights dimmed further. Sarai traced the line of Elias's jaw in the dark. Historically improbable, she mused. I like that. It fits us. Elias agreed. 6 months later, the Grand Plaza of the Nexus station was unrecognizable. The military barricades were gone, replaced by markets and gardens. The distributed council was in its first session, a chaotic, loud, and beautiful mess of democracy involving 30 species. Sarai stood on the balcony of the Cultural Commission, overlooking the plaza. She wore a simple tunic, no robes, no armor. She held a data pad, reviewing the latest archaeological grants. Elias walked up behind her, handing her a cup of steaming tea. You look like a bureaucrat, he teased. I prefer the term administrator of truth, she replied, taking the tea. It sounds more mysterious. Elias leaned against the railing. He looked tired but happy. He had spent the last month leading a joint team of human and diaspora researchers to catalog the Ring Moon archives. The directorate is officially dissolved, Elias said. The courts just seized their last assets. Vey is plea bargaining. He says he was just following orders. They always say that, Sarai said, her eyes darkening for a moment. But this time, no one is listening. She looked out at the stars. The fail-safe fleet, now the Guardian fleet, was patrolling the outer lanes, their weapons cold, their hangars open to inspection teams. You know, Elias said, looking at her. There is a rumor going around. Oh? They say the Pale Queen refused the throne because she fell in love with a scoundrel. Sarai smiled. She turned to him, the wind catching her dark hair. Let them talk. Myths are useful, but the truth is better. What is the truth? Elias asked. She reached out and touched his chest, right over his heart. The truth, she said softly, is that I did not refuse the throne. I just found a better seat. She looked into his eyes, the golden irises swirling with warmth. Elias, do you remember the first thing you said to me? I said. I have got you, Elias replied. And you did. She said, you caught me when I fell out of history. She looked back at the city, at the life teeming below them, a future she had died to protect and had been reborn to enjoy. Your voice was my first memory, Elias. It woke me up. It brought me back. But everything I have done since then, the rebellion, the council, choosing you? She took his hand, interlacing their fingers. Those were my choices, and my choices will be my legacy. Elias squeezed her hand, ready to get back to work. Administrator? Sarai finished her tea and set the cup on the railing. Always, she said. Together they turned and walked back inside, leaving the balcony empty under the light of 1 billion free stars.